The enemy commander raised his rifle, aimed it at a wounded American medic, crawling toward a fallen boy, and fired without a flicker of hesitation. The medic went still. The boy screamed once, then went silent too. And the man who did it, a professional soldier in clean gear, simply lowered his weapon and smiled as if he had swatted a fly. He turned to his men and pointed at the ridge at the pinned Americans and gave the order to finish them all. That smile was the last thing many of Alpha Platoon expected to survive. They were wrong about who would break first. Before we go any further, if stories of courage, sacrifice, and impossible odds move something in, you take a moment right now to subscribe to this channel and follow this story all the way to the end, because what happens on this ridge will stay with you. And do me one small favor. In the comments below, tell me the city you are watching from so I can see just how far this story has traveled across the world. Now let us begin. The first mortar landed close enough to throw Sergeant Cole Matthews off his feet before his brain even registered the sound. 1 second, he was standing at the edge of the observation post, coffee going cold in a tin cup, and the next second the world turned white and loud, and the cup was gone, and his ears were ringing like church bells at the end of everything. He hit the dirt hard. He tasted blood. He did not know yet whose blood it was. Contact! Contact! We got contact from the tree line. Someone was screaming, and Cole recognized the voice as Private Dawson, a 20-year-old kid from Ohio who still called him Sir, even after Cole told him 100 times that sergeants work for a living. Get down, Dawson! Get your head down! Cole shouted back, crawling toward the sandbag wall. And that was when the machine gun fire started a long, ripping sound that chewed the top of the barrier apart and sent chips of stone into the air like hail. Ember Ridge was supposed to be quiet. That was the whole point of it. A forward observation post, a bump of high ground overlooking a valley that intelligence swore was empty. Alpha Platoon had drawn the short straw and gotten sent up to watch nothing happen for 2 weeks. Sit, watch, radio in, come home. That was the mission. Nobody said anything about a coordinated assault. Nobody said anything about professional fire and layered cover and an enemy that moved like it had rehearsed this exact attack a dozen times. But that is what came out of the tree line that morning. Not a ragged band, a machine. Where is that fire coming from? Cole yelled, pressing himself flat against the wall. Somebody give me a direction. 200 meters, maybe less. They got a gun position in the rocks, Corporal Nunez shouted from 3 feet away, and Cole turned and saw that Nunez was bleeding from a gash above his eye, the blood running down into his beard, and Nunez did not even seem to notice. You hit? I'm fine, it's nothing. Nunez wiped his face and smeared it worse. Cole, we are getting flanked. They're coming up the left. Cole risked a look over the wall and immediately ducked back down as another burst hammered the sandbags. But in that half second, he saw enough. He saw shapes moving through the low ground on the left, moving in twos, one covering, while the other advanced textbook stuff, discipline stuff, and his stomach went cold because that meant these were not amateurs. Amateurs bunch up and pray. These men were bounding. These men knew exactly what they were doing. They're bounding on the left, he said mostly to himself, then louder. Get me the radio. Where's the radio? Dawson, get me comms. I need to call this in right now. There was a pause. In a firefight, a pause is a terrible thing. Sarge, Dawson called back, and his voice had changed, the fear in it going deeper. Sarge, the radio's gone. The mortar hit the CP. Rodriguez was on the radio when it hit. It's gone, Sarge. Cole closed his eyes for 1 full second. 1. Rodriguez, 23 years old, married 8 months ago, showed everybody the wedding photos on his phone until they threatened to throw the phone in the latrine. And now Rodriguez was gone and the radio with him, and that meant no artillery, no air support, no reinforcements, because nobody down at the base even knew Ember Ridge was under attack yet. They were a bump of high ground, and 31 men cut off from the world with an enemy company closing in. 31 men. Cole did the math without wanting to. Some of those 31 were already down. Okay, he said. Okay, listen up. Everybody listen to me. He had to shout it 3 times over the noise before the men closest to him turned their heads. Comms are down. Nobody's coming for a while. That means we hold. We hold this line and we make them pay for every foot. Nunez, take 4 men and cover that left approach. Do not let them get around us. Dawson, you stay on that machine gun and you keep their heads down. Everybody else, pick your targets, conserve ammo, and stay low. We are getting off this ridge alive. You hear me? All of us, alive. They did not all believe him. He could see it in their faces. But they moved because that was the ching, and because a scared man will follow anybody who sounds like he has a plan, even when the plan is just hold on and hope. The next 20 minutes were the longest of Cole Matthews' life, and he had spent time in 3 deployments, and he thought he knew what long felt like. He was wrong. The enemy pressed. They pressed hard and they pressed smart. Every time Alpha Platoon got a firing rhythm going, a new position would open up from a new angle, forcing them to shift to expose themselves to bleed. Cole watched a young private named Kettler take a round through the shoulder and spin like a top and go down screaming, and he watched the platoon medic, a soft-spoken man named Doc Ferris, crawl through open ground to reach him. And he watched Doc Ferris get hit twice pulling Kettler back, and somehow both of them lived, but only just. Doc, how bad?" Cole shouted. I got him! He's gonna keep his arm," Doc Ferris called back, his own legs soaked red, and even wounded the man was thinking about somebody else first, and Cole loved him for it and hated this whole day for putting him there. The left flank was buckling. Nunez was doing everything right, and it was not enough. There were simply too many of them, and they had the numbers to keep coming wave after a patient wave. And then the enemy sniper started working. Cole heard the first shot but did not understand it because it did not sound like the rest of the fight. It was a single flat crack, distant and precise, and a half-second later, Private Dawson stopped firing his machine gun. Just stopped. Cole looked over, and Dawson was slumped against the gun, and there was a small dark hole in the side of his helmet, and the kid from Ohio who worked for a living was not going to grow old. Dawson, Cole's mouth said the name before his mind accepted it. Dawson, get up. Dawson, he did not get up. Sniper Nunez was screaming from the left. We got a sniper. He got Dawson. Everybody down, get down, get down. The whole character of the fight changed in that instant. Before, the men had been scared but functional. Now a new kind of fear moved through them, the specific animal terror of being hunted by something you cannot see and cannot shoot back at. A sniper does not just kill. A sniper freezes an entire unit, pins them behind cover, strips away their will, and lets the rest of the attack roll over them while they cower. Cole knew it, and Cole understood in that moment with a clarity that felt almost peaceful that Alpha Platoon was going to die on Ember Ridge unless something changed in the next few minutes. Another flat crack. Corporal Vance, who had been reaching for a fresh magazine, dropped without a sound. Another. A private whose name Cole would later be ashamed he could not remember in that instant gone. The enemy sniper was picking them apart one at a time, and there was nothing Cole could do about it because Alpha Platoon was an infantry platoon on a routine observation mission, and they did not have a designated marksman anymore because their designated marksman had rotated home 3 weeks ago, and his replacement had not arrived yet. Of all the rotten luck, of all the ways for it to break. Cole Bain, Nunez was beside him now, having crawled the whole way, and his face was gray under the blood. Cole, we can't hold. That sniper's got us pinned, and they're going to come right up the middle. We need to do something or we're done. We are done, man. I know. So what do we do? Cole looked at his men. He looked at the ones still alive, hunched behind rocks and sandbags, faces down, hands white on their rifles. He looked at the ones who were not alive anymore. Dawson, Vance, Rodriguez. And he felt the whole weight of it settle onto his shoulders. The weight every leader dreads, the moment when you realize you might not be able to keep the promise you made. The promise that all of us are getting home alive. And then because he had nothing left, because he was out of plans and out of options and out of everything except the desperate refusal to just lie down and let it happen, Cole Matthews rose up onto his knees behind the wall and did the only thing he could think of. He shouted a question into the chaos, a question that made no sense for a routine observation platoon to be asking, a question born purely of the drowning man's instinct to grab at anything. Any snipers here? He roared, his voice cracking with the strain of it. I need a shooter. Anybody. Any snipers in this platoon? I need somebody who can shoot back at that son of a bitch. Anybody. Nobody answered. Of course nobody answered. They were logistics, support, an infantry rifleman, and a wounded medic. There were no snipers on Ember Ridge. Cole knew it even as he screamed it. He was screaming into an empty sky. Any snipers here? He shouted again, hearing his own voice break, hearing the despair in it. Please, somebody. Anybody who's got the training, I need you right now. The flat crack came again. Another man fell. Somewhere down the line, somebody was sobbing. And Cole, on his knees in the dirt, felt something in his chest give way. Because this was it. This was the moment he had always feared, the moment when the answer to his desperate call was silence. And silence meant they were all going to die here on a nothing ridge overlooking an empty valley that was supposed to be quiet. He was about to drop back down. He was about to give the only order he had left, which was for every man to fix bayonets and sell himself as dear as he could. He had his mouth open to say it, and that was when 20 feet down the line, back near those supply crates where the logistics detail had been stacking ammunition, when the attack began, a soldier stood up. Not fast, not with a shout, not the way you stand up in a firefight, which is quick and low and terrified. This soldier stood up slow, all the way up, straightening to full height in the open, where the sniper could see where the machine guns could reach, standing up like the storm of steel in the air, or simply did not apply. It was the logistics transfer soldier, the quiet one, the one nobody really knew because she had only been attached to the platoon for a few days, sent up with the last resupply run and stuck on the ridge when the schedule changed. Private First Class Ava Reynolds. She had spent 2 days counting boxes and stacking crates and saying maybe a dozen words total, keeping to herself, eating alone. A small, quiet young woman with a logistics patch on her shoulder and eyes that never quite seemed to land on anything. And now she was standing up in the middle of a firefight without fear and without emotion, and every man who saw her felt a cold finger run down his spine because there was something in the way she stood that did not belong, something that did not match the patch on her shoulder at all. "Get down!" Cole screamed at her. "Reynolds, get down! You'll get killed! Get down right now! That's an order!" She did not get down. She turned her head slowly and looked at Cole, and her expression was so calm, so absolutely without panic, that for a second Cole forgot to keep shouting. Her eyes finally landed on something, and that something was him. "You said you needed a sniper, Sergeant," she said. Her voice was quiet. It was so quiet he should not have been able to hear it over the gunfire, and yet somehow he heard every word. "I heard you. I need you to get down before you catch a round. That's what I need." "No." She shook her head once. "You need someone to take that shooter out of the fight. That's what you need." And then Private First Class Ava Reynolds knelt down beside the supply crates, not in cover, not really, and she reached for a long, hard case that had been sitting among the logistics gear the whole time. A case that everyone had assumed held tools or parts or some piece of equipment, a case that nobody had thought twice about. And she flipped the latches. Nunez crouched next to Cole, breathed out one word. "What the hell?" Because inside the case, cradled in custom foam cut to its exact shape, was not tools, was not parts. Inside the case was a weapon, and not just any weapon. It was a full-length rifle, long and heavy and purposeful, a large caliber precision system with a suppressor and a bipod folded against the barrel, and mounted on top of it was an optic that cost more than most of the men on that ridge made in a year. And in the foam beside it in neat rows were the rounds. Big rounds. The kind of rounds that punch through walls and vehicles and body armor like it was paper. It was a 50 caliber sniper system, fully customized, precision optics, armor-piercing ammunition. It was without any question at all the personal weapon of a professional long-range shooter, and it had been sitting among the ration crates and the spare batteries disguised as logistics gear the entire time. "That's a Barrett." Cole heard himself say the words falling out of him. "That's a 50 cal Barrett. Reynolds, where in God's name did a logistics clerk get a 50 cal Barrett?" Ava did not answer him. She was busy. And that was the thing that made the hair stand up on the back of Cole's neck. It was not the weapon. It was the way she handled it. Her hands moved over the rifle with a speed and an economy that came only from 10,000 repetitions, from muscle memory, burned so deep it did not need thought. She snapped the bipod open. She checked the optic. She thumbed the rounds into the magazine without looking at them, her eyes already up and scanning the tree line, already reading the ground, already working the problem. She did not fumble. She did not hesitate. She did not do a single thing a logistics clerk would do. She did everything a master sniper would do. "Nunez," Cole said slowly, "are you seeing this?" "I'm seeing it," Nunez whispered. "I'm seeing it and I don't believe it." Ava had gone down prone now behind a low hump of ground. The big rifle settled onto its bipod. her cheek welded to the stock, her whole body gone still in a way that human bodies do not usually go still, especially not with bullets cracking overhead. She was breathing slow. Cole could see it. In the middle of the worst firefight of his life, this small, quiet woman had reduced her breathing to a slow, even rhythm, the rhythm of someone who had learned to make her own heartbeat obey her. "Sergeant Matthews," she said without taking her eye from the scope. Her voice was flat and level. "I need a direction on that shooter. Which sector did the shots come from?" Cole blinked. His mouth had gone dry. The shots, right, they came from that ridgeline across the valley in the rocks near the dead pine, I think maybe 800 meters. I can't be sure. 800 meters, dead pine, high ground. She said it back to him, and her voice did not change at all. And somehow that was more frightening than any amount of shouting. "Good, that's good. Keep your men behind cover, Sergeant. All of them. This next part isn't going to be pretty for anyone on the wrong end of it." "Reynolds." Cole did not know why he said her name again. Maybe because he needed to believe she was real. "Reynolds, who are you? What are you?" For just an instant, just a fraction of a second, her eye flicked away from the scope and met his. And in that instant, Cole saw something in her that he would spend a long time afterward trying to name, something old and cold and unbearably tired, the look of a person who had seen the far edge of something terrible and walked back from it alone. "Right now," she said quietly, "I'm the reason your men are going to live." And she put her eye back to the scope. What happened over the next several minutes, Cole Matthews would tell and retell for the rest of his life, and even in his own telling, he would never quite make people believe it because it did not sound like a thing a human being could do. It sounded like a story, but he was there. He watched it happen. The enemy sniper fired again, and this time Cole was watching Ava when it happened, and he saw her whole body register the shot, saw her head tilt a fraction of a degree, saw her track something invisible across the far ridgeline. She had heard the crack, and she had, in the space of a single heartbeat, calculated backward along the line of the sound to the source. Where a trained infantryman heard noise and confusion, she heard information, and she read it the way other people read street signs. "Got you," she murmured. So soft, Cole almost missed it. "There you are." "You see him," Cole hissed. "You got eyes on the sniper." "I've got eyes on his muzzle flash. He's in the rocks like you said, but low-tucked behind the dead pine, thinks he's got good concealment." A pause. Her finger moved on to the trigger. "He does have good concealment. From everyone but me. What are you waiting for?" "The wind." Her voice was patient, almost gentle, the way you might explain something to a child. "There's a crosswind pushing left to right across the valley, maybe 8 miles an hour gusting. If I fire during a gust, I miss, and then he knows I'm here, and then this gets much harder. So I wait. I wait for the wind to lie down, and then I take him." Cole had no idea how she could read the wind 800 meters away across a valley in the middle of a battle. He did not ask. He just watched her lie there still as stone, her finger resting on the trigger, waiting with a patience that seemed to exist entirely outside of the chaos surrounding her. Men were screaming and dying 20 feet away, and she was waiting for a gust of wind to pass. 3 seconds. 5. Cole stopped breathing. And then Ava exhaled slow and controlled, letting the air out of her lungs to the natural pause at the bottom of the breath, and in that pause, in that dead perfect stillness, she pressed the trigger. The rifle went off like the end of the world. The report of a .50 caliber is not like other gunfire. It is a physical thing, a slap of pressure that Cole felt in his chest even from where he crouched, a deep hammering boom that rolled across the ridge and momentarily silenced everything else. The muzzle blast kicked up a cloud of dust. The rifle rocked back into Ava's shoulder, and she rode the recoil the way a sailor rides a wave, absorbing it, already cycling the bolt, already back on target. 800 meters away, the enemy sniper, who had been methodically dismantling Alpha Platoon, simply ceased to exist as a threat. "Target down," Ava said, flat, calm, clinical. "That shooter won't trouble your men again." For a moment, Cole could not speak. He stared at her, and then he stared out across the valley toward the dead pine, and he could not see the result of the shot from here. But he did not need to. He had seen her face when she fired. There was no doubt in it. There was no hope in it, no maybe, no "we'll see." There was only the quiet certainty of a person who had done a thing she knew how to do and knew she had done it correctly. One shot, Nunez breathed beside him. She got him in one shot. 800 meters in this wind, in the middle of all this one shot. She's not a clerk, Cole said. The words came out of him slow, like he was only now truly understanding them. She was never a clerk, Nunez. She is not a logistics clerk. Then what is she? Cole did not have an answer, but he was starting to be afraid of what the answer might be, because Ava Reynolds was not finished. Not even close. With the enemy sniper eliminated, the specific paralysis that had gripped the platoon began to ease, but the assault itself had not stopped. The machine gun in the rocks was still hammering away, and the flanking element on the left was still bounding forward, and the mortars were still dropping, and the enemy commander, the one who had smiled after murdering a wounded medic, was still driving his men up the ridge with the calm confidence of a man who had already won. He did not yet understand what had happened to his sniper. He would understand very soon. "Sergeant!" Ava said, her voice still perfectly level, her eye never leaving the scope. "That machine gun position in the rocks. The one that's been pinning your right flank. I'm going to take the gunner first, then the assistant gunner when he tries to take over. When I do, that whole right side is going to open up for maybe 10 seconds before they reorganize. Have your men ready to shift and take advantage. Can you do that?" Cole realized she was giving him orders. A private first class, a logistics transfer, was calmly directing the tactical response of an infantry platoon and its sergeant. And the thing was, her read of the battlefield was perfect. She had seen in a few seconds what Cole had been struggling to see for 20 minutes. The machine gun was the linchpin of the enemy's right side. Take it out and the whole approach would falter. "Yeah," Cole said. "Yeah, I can do that. Nunez, get the word down the line. When that gun goes quiet, we shift right and hit them hard. Pass it on. Quiet, quiet." On it. Ava was already tracking. Cole watched her ease the big rifle a few degrees to the right, watched her settle, watched her breathing drop back into that impossible calm. He watched her wait, and this time he understood a little of what she was doing. She was watching the gunner, learning his rhythm, waiting for the fraction of a second when he would be most exposed. "Firing," she said. Boom, the machine gun stopped. For 3 heartbeats, there was a strange ringing quiet on the right side of the ridge. Then, exactly as Ava had predicted, another figure scrambled to take over the gun, the assistant gunner moving fast to get the weapon back into action. "He's going to grab the gun," Ava said, tracking him. "He's committed. He's not thinking about me. He's thinking about the gun." Boom! The assistant gunner fell across the weapon and did not get up. "Now, Sergeant," Ava said. "Right now. Shift right. Shift right. Shift right. Take that flank. Go, go, go." Cole was up and moving and screaming it. An Alpha platoon, which moments ago had been a frozen dying thing, surged with him. The men suddenly finding their courage again, because the impossible had happened, because the sniper who had been hunting them was dead, and the machine gun that had pinned them was silent, and for the first time in this whole nightmare morning, they had a chance to hit back. They hit the exposed right flank, and they hit it hard, and the enemy element there, caught in the open with no gun support and no sniper cover, broke and fell back in disorder. It was the first time all morning that the enemy had given ground. The first time. And it changed something in the men of Alpha Platoon, lit a fire in them, gave them back the thing that a good defense cannot exist without, which is the belief that they might actually win. But the enemy commander was still out there, and he was still smart, and he was not going to let a single lucky shooter turn his sure victory into a defeat. Cole understood this even in the middle of the surge. He understood that the enemy would adapt, would find. Ava would concentrate everything they had on eliminating the one weapon that had turned the tide. And he understood with a sick certainty that Ava Reynolds knew this too, and that she did not care because she had already lain down in the open with a rifle that announced its position to the entire valley every single time she fired it, and she had done it without a flicker of fear. "Reynolds," Cole shouted, dropping back into cover beside her as the platoon consolidated its gains. "They're going to come looking for you now. That 50 cal lights you up like a flare every time you shoot. They're going to throw everything at your position. You need to displace, you need to move, you can't just sit here." "I know," Ava said calmly, already tracking a new target across the valley. "Then move." "Not yet." Boom. Somewhere in the tree line, an enemy squad leader who had been trying to rally his men fell. "If I move now, I lose my angle on their command element. And their command element is the whole battle, Sergeant. Kill the head and the body dies." I need to stay here just a little longer. You're going to get yourself killed. For the second time, Ava took her eye off the scope and looked at him. And this time there was something almost like a smile at the corner of her mouth, though it never reached her eyes and her eyes stayed as tired and old as before. Sergeant Matthews, she said, do you want to know a secret? What? I've been getting myself killed for years. She put her eye back to the scope. I'm very good at surviving it. And then before Cole could ask her what in the world that was supposed to mean, she started to work in earnest, and Cole Matthews shut his mouth and watched a thing he did not have words for. Because Ava Reynolds began to take the enemy assault apart, the way a surgeon takes apart a diseased body, methodically, without waste, without mercy, one precise cut at a time. She found the mortar crew first. They had set up in defilade tucked behind a low-rise where they thought they were safe, dropping rounds onto the ridge on a steady rhythm, and they were the reason Alpha Platoon could not simply hunker down and hold, because the mortars reached over the walls and found the men behind them. Cole had known the mortars were killing his platoon, and he had been able to do nothing about it. Ava did something about it. She could not see the crew directly, but she could see the top of their rise, and she could see the faint disturbance of dust each time they fired, and she waited, and she read the ground, and when a single mortar man rose up just enough to check his fire, she took him. Then the next one, who moved to the tube. Then the next. Mortars are silent, she reported, as calm as a woman reading a grocery list. That's their crew combat ineffective. Your men can move now without worrying about indirect fire. The change on the ridge was immediate and profound. The moment the mortar stopped falling, the men of Alpha Platoon could lift their heads, could aim, could fight like soldiers instead of cowering like prey. Cole felt the whole momentum of the battle tilt, felt it swing on its hinge, and he knew exactly what the hinge was. It was a small, quiet woman lying prone in the dirt with a rifle she was not supposed to have. Who taught you this? Cole asked her low. Nobody learns this stuff in logistics. Nobody. Who are you, Reynolds? She did not answer, but her jaw tightened just slightly, and Cole filed that away, the small crack in the calm, the flinch that told him her silence was not empty. Her silence was full. Her silence was carrying something heavy. She found a forward commander next. Cole did not even know how she identified him from 800 meters away, but Ava did, watching the enemy formation, the way a chess player watches a board, reading the patterns, noting who the other men looked to, who directed movement, who stood a half step back and gave orders instead of taking them. See the one behind the second squad, she murmured. The one who's not shooting, the one everyone keeps glancing at. I can't see him. How can you even see him? He's their platoon leader, or their company commander's second. He's coordinating the whole left side. Watch. Boom. Now he isn't. And the left side of the enemy attack, which had been advancing with such crisp discipline, suddenly lost its coordination. The bounding stopped. The men without the hand directing them began to hesitate, to bunch, to look to one another for orders that were not coming, and in that hesitation, Alpha Platoon's fire began to find them. Cole watched it happen, and a cold understanding settled over him. Ava was not just killing enemy soldiers. Any decent shooter could kill enemy soldiers. Ava was killing the enemy's ability to function as an organized force. She was reaching into the machine and pulling out the specific gears that made it run, and she was doing it in an order, a deliberate sequence: sniper first, then crew-served weapons, then leadership, then command. Each removal designed to collapse the whole structure a little more. You're not just shooting them, Cole said, and he heard the awe in his own voice and could not stop it. You're taking apart their whole plan, piece by piece, on purpose. An assault is a machine, Ava said quietly. It has parts. Some parts matter more than others. You don't kill everyone, Sergeant. You can't kill everyone. There's always more of them than there are bullets. So you don't try to kill everyone. You kill the parts that make the machine run, and you let the machine kill itself. She shifted her aim. My instructor taught me that a long time ago. There it was again. That crack. My instructor, said with a weight that had nothing to do with the tactics and everything to do with something buried deep. Your instructor, Cole repeated. In logistics school, Ava did not laugh, but something in her face acknowledged the absurdity of the question. No, Sergeant, not in logistics school. And then so quietly Cole barely heard it. So quietly he wondered afterward if she had meant to say it out loud at all. She added, he's dead now. He died waiting for permission that came too late. That's a different story. And then she fired again, and another enemy leader fell, and she said nothing more about it, and Cole knew better than to push. But he had heard it. He had heard the door open, just a crack, and he had seen the darkness behind it, and he understood now that whoever Ava Reynolds really was, she had not come to logistics by accident. She had come to logistics running from something. From herself, maybe. From the things she had just shown all of them she could do. The enemy commander, the one who had smiled, finally understood what was happening to him. Cole could not see the man, but he could see the effect of the man's dawning comprehension in the way the enemy attack began to change shape. The confident, methodical advance was gone. Now there was hesitation, then confusion, then the first ragged edges of something Cole had prayed for all morning and never expected to see. Fear. The enemy was starting to be afraid. They had walked up this ridge expecting to butcher a pinned and helpless platoon, and instead an invisible hand was reaching down out of nowhere and plucking their best men off the board. One by one, their sniper, their gunners, their leaders, and there was nothing they could do about it. No cover that was good enough, no movement that was fast enough, no plan that survived, contact with the small, quiet woman on the ridge. "They're pulling back," Nunez said, disbelief plain in his voice. "Cole, look, the whole center's pulling back. They're breaking." "Not for long," Ava said without looking up. "That commander's still in the fight. He's just repositioning. He's going to try something. Sergeant, keep your men sharp. This isn't over. When a professional loses his first plan, he doesn't run. He makes a new plan, and his new plan is going to be about me." Cole felt the truth of it in his gut. Because Ava had changed the battle, yes. She had saved them for now. But she had done it by making herself the single most important target on the entire ridge, and the enemy commander was not a fool, and he now knew exactly where his defeat was coming from. Everything the enemy had left, all their remaining strength and rage and professional pride was about to be aimed at one position, at one soldier, at the girl with the wrong job. Cole looked at Ava Reynolds lying calm and steady in the dirt, cycling the bolt on a rifle that should not exist in the hands of a logistics clerk, and he understood that he was watching someone who had walked away from exactly this kind of moment, and had built a whole quiet, ordinary life for herself, stacking crates and counting rations precisely so she would never have to lie in the dirt and be this again. And Ember Ridge had reached out and dragged her right back into it. It had put a sergeant on his knees, screaming, "Any snipers here?" And she had heard that scream, and she had stood up, and now there was no going back to the crates. Now she was what she had always been, whether she wanted it or not. "Reynolds," Cole said, "whatever happens next, whatever they throw at us, I want you to know something." "Sergeant, this really isn't the time for a speech." "It's not a speech, it's a fact. You stood up when nobody else could. You stood up and you saved every man on this ridge who's still breathing." He swallowed. "I don't know who you are. I don't know what you're running from. But you saved us, and I'm not going to forget it, and I'm not going to let you die up here alone either. Whatever's coming, we face it together. You hear me? Together." For a long moment, Ava was silent. Her eyes stayed on the scope. Her breathing stayed slow. And then quietly, without turning, she said something that Cole did not fully understand until much later, until he knew the whole story, until he learned about the program called Shadowline and the instructor who died and the permission that came too late. "That's the problem, Sergeant," Ava Reynolds said softly. "The last time somebody told me we'd face it together, I believed him. And then I watched him die, and I've been alone ever since. So forgive me if I don't put much faith in together anymore." Her fingers settled onto the trigger. "But thank you for saying it. It's been a long time since anyone did." And out across the valley, the enemy commander who had smiled after killing a wounded man was already moving, already gathering his reinforcements, already building the new plan, the plan that would bring the full weight of everything he had left, crashing down onto one exposed position, and one quiet woman who had decided for reasons Cole did not yet understand that if she was going to be dragged back into the thing she had run from, then she was going to make it count. The wind shifted across the valley. Ava read it and adjusted and breathed out slow and waited for the next target to show itself. And on Ember Ridge, the men of Alpha Platoon, who 20 minutes ago had been ready to grip their rifles a little tighter and lifted their heads a little higher and waited beside the girl with the wrong job for whatever was coming next. Cole watched her lying there so still, so calm, so impossibly alone, even surrounded by the men she had just saved, and he made himself a promise. He did not know yet if he could keep it, But he made it anyway, the same kind of promise he had made at the start of the morning, the promise that had almost broken him when the radio died and the sniper opened up and the answer to his desperate question was silence. He promised himself that Ava Reynolds was not going to die alone on this ridge. He just did not know yet how much that promise was going to cost. The enemy machine gun opened up again from a new position farther out, harder to reach, and Ava's head turned toward the sound, tracking it, reading it, already solving it. And Cole realized that the real battle for Ember Ridge, the one that would decide whether any of them walked off this hill, had not even truly begun. It was just getting started. The new machine gun position was smart. Cole gave the enemy commander that much. It was set farther back, tucked into a fold of ground where Ava's angle was poor, and it was already spitting fire across the ridge, forcing the men of Alpha Platoon back down behind their walls, just when they had started to believe the worst was over. He learns fast, Ava murmured, shifting the big rifle a few degrees, hunting for the angle. He watched me kill the last gun crew, and he set this one up where I can't reach it clean. That's a good officer. That's a dangerous officer. Can you get him? Cole asked. Not from here. I can see the muzzle flash, but I can't see the gunner. There's a lip of rock between us. She was quiet for a second, thinking. I can put a round through the rock if I put it in exactly the right place. Armor piercing, it'll spall. Might not kill him, but it'll ruin his day. Do it. It'll cost me 3 rounds and give away that I'm working a new sector. He'll adjust. She exhaled. But that gun's chewing up your men. So yeah, I'll do it. Boom! The rifle slammed back. A chip of the rock lip vanished in a puff of gray dust. Boom! The gun kept firing. Boom! The gun stopped. Spall got him, or got the gun, Ava said. Doesn't matter which. That position's down for now. She was already moving, her eye already scanning. But he knows I found it. He'll try something else. Sergeant, get your men water and ammo redistributed while they've got the chance. They're going to need it. This isn't a man who quits. Cole passed the word, and while Nunez moved down the line, handing out magazines pulled from the dead, Cole stayed low beside Ava, and for the first time since she stood up, there was a pocket of something almost like quiet 30 seconds where nobody was shooting at them. And in that pocket, Cole found himself studying her. The way her hands never fully relaxed, the way her eyes never stopped moving, the way she lay there like a coiled thing, like a person who had learned that the moment you let your guard down is the moment the world takes everything from you. Reynolds, he said, that instructor you mentioned, the one who died waiting for permission. Her jaw tightened. He saw it. Sergeant, I'm not trying to pry, I need to understand who I'm fighting next to. If we're going to get off this ridge, I need to know what you can do, and I need to know what's going to break you. He paused. So, your instructor, what happened? For a long moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. Her eyes stayed on the scope. Her breathing stayed slow. And then so quietly he had to lean in, she spoke. His name was Sergeant First Class Daniel Kessler, she said. Everybody called him Kess. He was the best shooter I ever saw, and he was the one who found me back when I was just a scared kid who happened to be good with a rifle and didn't know what to do with it. A pause. He pulled me into a program, trained me himself, taught me everything. How to read wind, how to read ground, how to read people, how to lie still for 18 hours without moving a muscle, how to take a life and keep your soul. Her voice went flatter, and he taught me the most important thing. He taught me that the shot is never the hard part. The hard part is the waiting. The hard part is the trust. The trust. When you're out there in a denied zone, Sergeant deep behind the lines, you don't act on your own. You call it in. You find the target, you confirm the target, and you wait for command to give you the green light to fire. Because the wrong shot can start a war. So you wait. You trust that the people back there, safe in their chairs, watching your feet on a screen, that they'll make the right call at the right time. She stopped. When she spoke again, something in her voice had gone cold and hard as winter iron. And most of the time they do. But the one time it matters most, the one time a man's life is hanging on it, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they hesitate. Sometimes they want to be sure, and by the time they're sure, the man you were supposed to be protecting is already dead. Cole said nothing. He understood he was standing at the edge of the thing, the deep buried thing, and that one wrong word would close the door. There was a mission, Ava said. I don't get to tell you where, denied zone. Kess and me and two others. We had eyes on a target that mattered, a target that would have saved a lot of lives if we took it. But there were complications, political ones. So we called it in and we waited for the green light. Her finger resting alongside the trigger guard went white at the knuckle. And they made us wait. And while we waited, the situation went bad. The target's people found us. They found Kess first. And I had a sergeant. I had a clean shot on the man who was about to kill him. I had him dead in my crosshairs and my finger on the trigger, and all I needed was one word from command. One word. Green light. Take the shot. They didn't give it to you. They hesitated. The word came out of her like something torn loose. 3 seconds, maybe 4. They wanted to be sure. And in those 3 or 4 seconds, I watched a man put a rifle against the back of Kess's head, and I watched him pull the trigger, and I watched the best man I ever knew fall down dead in the dirt while I lay there with a green light. I never got obeying an order to wait. She was silent for a beat. I took the shot after. Too late. I took all of them after. Too late. And then I got what was left of my team out, and I came home, and I put in my papers to leave the program, and I asked for the quietest, safest, most boring job the Army had. Logistics. Counting boxes. Because I decided that if the world was going to make me wait for permission to save the people I care about, then I wasn't going to care about anybody ever again. That way there's nobody to lose. Cole let out a slow breath. That's why you carry that rifle in a logistics case. I couldn't leave it behind. Her voice dropped almost to nothing. I told myself I'd never use it again, but I couldn't leave it behind. Kess built that rifle for me with his own hands. It's the only piece of him I've got left. So I keep it packed up in a case that looks like tool gear, and I carry it around, and I tell myself I'll never open it. She finally looked at Cole, and her eyes were dry, but there was an ocean behind them. And then a sergeant on a dying ridge got down on his knees and screamed, "Any snipers here?" And I heard Kess in my head telling me the shot is never the hard part. The hard part is the trust. And I stood up, because for the first time in 3 years, nobody was making me wait for permission. This time I got to decide, and I decided your men were going to live. Cole didn't have words. There weren't any that were big enough. So he just put his hand on her shoulder once firm and took it away. "Kess would be proud of you," he said. Ava turned back to her scope. "Kess is dead," she said quietly, "but thank you." And then in a different voice, sharp and alert, "Contact! They're moving again. Left side, and they've got smoke." The tender moment was gone in an instant, snapped shut like the case her rifle came in, and Cole scrambled to look. Sure enough, gray smoke was blooming across the low ground to the left, a curtain of it, thick and rolling, and Cole's stomach dropped because he understood exactly what it meant. "They're using the smoke to advance," he said. "They're going to come through it. We can't see them in that." "You can't see them in that," Ava corrected, already adjusting her position. "I can see heat. Watch." And Cole watched because he had learned in the last half hour that when Ava Reynolds said, "Watch, a miracle was about to happen." She settled the rifle and she waited, and Cole realized she was watching the smoke, watching the way it moved, watching for the disturbances in it that meant a body was passing through. He couldn't see them. To his eyes, the smoke was just smoke, an impenetrable gray wall. But Ava's eye, through that expensive optic, was seeing something his could not, the faint thermal shimmer of running men, the ripples they left in the smoke as they moved. "First one's committed," she said. "He thinks the smoke hides him." Boom. It doesn't. Second one's behind him following his path. Boom. That's a mistake. Never follow the man in front through smoke. Now they're both down in the same spot, and the third one's going to trip over them. Boom. The third one went down. And the advance through the smoke, which the enemy commander had surely believed was a foolproof way to close the distance unseen, simply died in the gray murk. 3 men down in a heap, and the men behind them refusing now to enter the smoke at all, because they had seen their comrades walk into it and never walk out, and they did not know how, and the not knowing was worse than the dying. "They won't use smoke against me again," Ava said. "Now they're afraid of their own smoke." "Good. Fear is a weapon, Sergeant. Sometimes the best thing you can do is make them afraid of the things they thought would protect them." Cole shook his head slowly. "Remind me never to make you angry." "You couldn't afford it," she said, and for just a flicker there was almost humor in it. But the enemy commander was not done. Cole had known he wouldn't be. A professional who loses two plans does not run. Ava had said he makes a third plan. And the third plan, when it came, was the kind of thing that told Cole the man across the valley was every bit as smart and every bit as ruthless as Ava had warned. The mortar started again. Not the old crew. Ava had killed the old crew. This was a new tube or a repositioned one, firing from somewhere Ava could not see and could not reach. And the rounds began walking across the ridge, methodical, patient searching. And Cole understood the horror of it in an instant because the mortars weren't trying to hit his men. They were trying to hit Ava. They're bracketing your position, Cole said, his voice climbing. Reynolds, those mortars are walking right toward you. They're not aiming at the platoon, they're aiming at you. They figured out where you are, and they're going to drop a round right on your head. I know. Ava's voice did not change. He can't see me, but he saw the general area my shots come from, so he's going to saturate that whole area until he gets lucky. It's what I do. She was still tracking, still hunting for the mortar tube, still refusing to move. The problem is I can't find that tube. It's in defilade deep, and I've got no angle on it. If I can't find it, I can't kill it, and if I can't kill it, sooner or later one of those rounds finds me. So move, displace right now, get out of the impact area. If I move, I lose my overwatch on the whole valley, and the second I stop shooting, that commander pushes his whole force up this ridge and rolls over your men before I can get set up again. She said it flat, factual, woman doing arithmetic. So it's a race, Sergeant. Either I find that mortar tube before it finds me, or one of us dies. And I don't intend for it to be me. Not today. Not until your men are off this ridge. Cole heard the next mortar round leave the tube, a distant hollow thunk, and he heard it whistling down, and he grabbed a fistful of Ava's gear and hauled, and she let him pull her back just as the round detonated exactly where her head had been a half-second before. The blast washed over both of them, a hammer of heat and pressure and flying grit, and Cole's ears screamed and his vision went white, and for a moment he thought they were both dead. They weren't, but it had been close. Closer than close. You just saved my life, Ava said, coughing, dragging the rifle back into position. That one had my name on it. Now we're even, Cole said. You saved all of ours. We're not even close to even, Sergeant. And there it was again, that flicker of something almost warm buried under all the ice. But she was already back on the gun. That was a good ranging shot. He's got me dialed in now. I've got maybe 2 more rounds before he puts one right on me. I need that tube. I need it now. How can I help? Tell me what to do. Ava was quiet for a heartbeat, and then she said something that made Cole's blood run cold. I need to see where the smoke trail comes from when the tube fires. The launch signature. But I can't watch the whole sky and stay on my scope at the same time. So I need eyes. I need someone to stand up, watch for the launch, and call the direction to me. A pause. And whoever does that is going to be exposed to every gun the enemy has left. It's as good as painting a target on your chest. Cole didn't hesitate. He didn't even let himself think about it. Where do you need me to look? Ava's eye came off the scope for just a second, and she looked at him, and there was something in her face that he hadn't seen before, a kind of startled recognition, as if she had asked a question, expecting silence, and gotten an answer instead. You'd do that, she said. It wasn't a question. It was disbelief. You'd stand up in the open and get shot at to help me find a mortar tube. You stood up for us, Cole said simply. I told you, whatever comes, we face it together. I meant it. For a long moment, Ava just looked at him, and then something moved across her face, something old and painful, and Cole realized what it was. It was the word. Together. The word she'd said she stopped believing in the day Kes died. And here was a man saying it to her and meaning it and offering to stand up in the open and take fire to prove it. Kes said that to me, she said quietly, the last morning, before it all went wrong. He said, whatever comes, we face it together. Her voice caught just slightly. And then command made me watch him die alone. So you'll forgive me, Sergeant, if that word scares me more than the mortars do. I'm not command, Cole said, and I'm not going to make you watch me die. Now tell me where to look. And Ava Reynolds, who had spent 3 years running from the word together, made a decision that Cole would only understand the full weight of much later. She decided to trust him. Northeast, and she said, watch the tree line above the notch in the ridge, maybe 1,000 meters. When that tube fires, you'll see a puff of smoke rise straight up out of the trees and then it'll drift. I need you to point right at it the instant you see it and hold your arm there. Don't move. Just point. I'll do the rest." She paused. "And Sergeant, the second I fire, you drop. You hear me? The instant that rifle goes off, you get down because they'll be shooting at both of us. Understand?" "Understood." "Then on my mark, get ready." She settled behind the rifle, breathing slow. "The next round he fires is going to be aimed at me, so I need you to spot the launch and stay standing long enough for me to backtrack it, even though you'll know a mortar round is already on its way toward us. That's the part I can't order you to do. That's the part you have to choose." Cole's mouth was dry as sand because he understood exactly what she was asking. She was asking him to stand up in the open spot, the launch of a mortar round that was aimed at killing them, and keep standing, keep pointing, hold his position while that round arced up into the sky and fell back down toward them, trusting that Ava could find and kill the tube in the handful of seconds before the round landed. It was a race between her shot and the enemy's shell, and Cole was the finish line. And if he flinched, if he dropped too soon, she'd lose the tube, and the next round would kill her for sure. "I'm choosing," Cole said. "Let's go." "Then stand up, Sergeant Matthews," Ava said softly, "and let's finish this." Cole stood up. The world exploded into noise around him instantly. Every enemy gun that had an angle opened up the moment he showed himself, rounds cracking past his head, kicking up dirt at his feet. And it took everything he had not to drop, not to dive back into cover, to just stand there in the storm and watch the northeast tree line above the notch, watching, waiting, his whole body screaming at him to get down. "Steady?" Ava's voice came impossibly calm from below him. "Steady, Sergeant. Watch for the puff." A round smashed into the sandbag inches from Cole's leg. He didn't move. Another cracked past his ear so close he felt the wind of it. He didn't move. And then in the tree line above the notch, exactly where Ava had said to look, a small gray puff of smoke rose straight up out of the branches. "Now!" Cole shouted, throwing his arm out, pointing dead at the smoke. "There, right there, 10 o'clock off the notch, in the trees, right there." He heard the mortar round leave the tube. He heard the hollow thunk, and he knew with a sick certainty that it was arcing up into the sky right now, climbing, and that in a few seconds it would fall back down toward the spot where he stood. And he made himself keep pointing, keep standing, keep his arm locked on that drifting puff of smoke while death climbed into the air above him. "I see it," Ava said, and her voice was the calmest thing in the world. "I see the tube. I see the crew. Hold your point, Sergeant. Hold it. Just one more second." The mortar round was coming down. Cole could almost feel it. Every instinct he had was howling at him to drop, to dive, to save himself. And he stood there with his arm out, pointing at the trees, and he did not move because a woman he'd known for half an hour had asked him to trust her. And he did. Boom. Ava's rifle went off, and in the same instant, Cole felt her hand grab his belt and yank with a strength that seemed impossible for someone her size, and he went down hard, slammed flat against the dirt, and a half second later, the enemy mortar round detonated in the air above where he had been standing. A burst of black smoke and screaming shrapnel that would have torn him apart if he'd still been on his feet. For a moment, neither of them moved. Cole lay in the dirt with his heart trying to punch its way out of his chest, and Ava lay beside him, her cheeks still against the stock, and the ringing in Cole's ears slowly faded, and he became aware of a silence. The mortars had stopped. "Tube's gone," Ava said quietly. "Got the gunner and the loader both. That's their indirect fire capability finished. All of it. He's got nothing left to reach over your walls with. From here on out, whatever he wants to do to your men, he has to come do it in person." She finally lifted her cheek from the stock and looked at Cole, and there was something in her eyes he hadn't seen before, something that on anyone else he would have called wonder. "You held. I asked you to stand in the open, with the mortar round coming down on your head, and you held. Do you know how rare that is, Sergeant? You said you'd get me down in time," Cole said, still breathing hard. "I believed you." Ava was quiet for a moment. "Kess used to say that trust is the only thing that makes a two-person team stronger than two people," she said. "I forgot that. For 3 years, I forgot it. I decided trust was a lie because the people I trusted let Kess die." She swallowed. "And then a sergeant I met 30 minutes ago stood up in a hailstorm because I asked him to, because he trusted me." Her voice went rough. You just gave me back something I thought was gone, Sergeant Matthews. I don't know if I can ever explain to you what that means. You don't have to, Cole said. Just keep us alive, and I'll call it even. But even as he said it, even in the strange, fragile warmth of that moment, Cole felt the cold hand of dread close around his heart. Because the mortars were gone, yes, and the smoke advance was broken, and the machine guns were silenced, and the snipers were dead, and Ava had dismantled nearly the entire enemy assault piece by patient piece. But the enemy commander was still out there, and the man had not committed his reserves. Reynolds, Cole said slowly, you said this guy's a professional. You said he doesn't quit. He doesn't. So what does a professional do when he's lost his sniper, his guns, his mortars, his smoke, and half his officers, and he's still got a mission to finish? Ava was silent for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice had gone very quiet and very grim. He stops being subtle, she said. He's tried finesse, and it cost him. So now he does the thing professionals hate to do, but will do when they have to. He masses everything he has left into one overwhelming push, and he throws it all at the single point that's been beating him. He accepts that he'll lose a lot of men, and he does it anyway because he calculates that even at that cost, sheer weight of numbers will carry the position. She looked up toward the far ridge. And the single point that's been beating him, Sergeant, is me. So when that push comes, it's coming right here, right at this spot. Everything he has left all at once aimed at one exposed position on this ridge. Cole followed her gaze across the valley, and even without her optic, even with his naked eye, he could see it beginning. Movement in the tree line. A lot of movement. More men than he'd seen all morning, gathering, forming up, no longer bounding in careful twos, but massing into a single dense fist. And he understood that Ava was exactly right, that the enemy commander had made his decision. That he was going to spend the lives of his men without hesitation to crush the one weapon that had humiliated him. How many? Cole asked. More than I have bullets for, Ava said quietly. A lot more. The words hung in the air between them. Cole looked at her, at this small, quiet woman who had appeared out of nowhere and saved his entire platoon, who had just given him the story of the worst day of her life, who had learned in the last 30 minutes to trust again after 3 years of running, and he understood that the mathematics of what was coming were simple and terrible. There were too many of them. Even a shooter like Ava couldn't kill a mass assault one round at a time. Sooner or later, they'd close the distance, and sooner or later, they'd reach the ridge, and sooner or later, the numbers would win unless something changed. There's a way, Ava said suddenly. She said it slowly, like the idea was assembling itself as she spoke, and Cole didn't like the sound of it at all. There's a way to break a mass assault with one shooter. Kes taught it to me, but you're not going to like it. Tell me. A mass assault has one weakness, Ava said. It only works if the men keep moving forward together all at once, all committed. That's what makes it unstoppable. The momentum, the sense that everyone's going, and so you have to go too. But that same thing is its weakness. Because if you can make them stop, even for a few seconds, if you can make them go to ground and lose their momentum, the whole assault stalls. And a stalled assault isn't an assault anymore. It's just a lot of scared men lying in the open with nowhere to hide. She paused. And the way you make a mass assault go to ground is you make the price of standing up so terrifying that no man will do it. You put yourself somewhere they can all see you somewhere impossible, and you kill so fast and so certain that every man out there believes that the instant he stands up, he dies. Cole felt his blood turn to ice because he already knew where this was going. Somewhere they can all see you, he repeated. Reynolds, what are you thinking? Ava turned and looked at the tall observation tower that stood at the highest point of the ridge, the old wooden and steel structure that had given Ember Ridge its purpose. The tower nobody had dared climb all morning, because it was the single most exposed position on the entire hill, a place where a person would be visible to every enemy in the valley and protected by absolutely nothing. That tower, she said quietly, from up there, I've got a clean angle on the whole valley. Every approach, every fold of ground, everywhere they can come from. From up there, nobody can hide from me. She swallowed. And from up there, I can't hide from anybody either. Every gun in that valley will be able to see me. Every one of them will aim at me. I'd be drawing every bit of enemy fire on this ridge onto myself. No, Cole said immediately. Absolutely not. No. Sergeant, no. You climb that tower, you're dead. There's no way you survive up there. They'll cut you to pieces the second you're in the open. Probably, Ava agreed calmly. But while they're cutting me to pieces, they're not shooting at your platoon. Every gun aimed at me is a gun that isn't aimed at your men. And from up there, before they get me, I can break their assault. I can make them go to ground. I can buy your platoon the time it needs to pull back off this ridge and get to safety. Her voice was steady and terribly certain. That's the trade, Sergeant. One shooter on a tower drawing all their fire, breaking their assault so 30 men can live. It's a good trade. Kess would take it. So will I. Cole grabbed her arm. I'm not letting you throw your life away. And Ava Reynolds looked at him, and she smiled, and it was the saddest smile Cole had ever seen on a human face. You're not letting me do anything, Sergeant, she said gently. For 3 years, other people decided when I got to save the ones I cared about. Command decided. They made me wait. They made me watch Kess die. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. But you gave me back the right to decide. When you trusted me, when you stood up in the open because I asked you to, you reminded me that I'm the one who chooses now. Nobody makes me wait for permission anymore. She gently pulled her arm out of his grip. And I'm choosing this. I'm choosing to climb that tower and break that assault and buy your men their lives. That's my choice. And this time, nobody, not command, not you, nobody gets to take it away from me. She began gathering rounds, filling her pouches, methodically preparing to climb into the most exposed and most dangerous position on the entire battlefield. And Cole knelt there beside her watching, and he understood that he could not stop her, that this small, quiet woman had made a decision that came from a wound 3 years deep, a decision to finally, on her own terms, be the shooter who did not have to wait for permission to save the people who mattered. Out across the valley, the enemy commander gave his order, and the massed assault began to move, a dense, dark tide of men pouring out of the tree line and up toward the ridge. Hundreds of them, more than any number of bullets, could stop rolling forward with the terrible momentum that Ava had said was both their strength and their only weakness. And Ava Reynolds slung her rifle across her back and looked up at the tower and then looked at Cole one more time. Get your men ready to move, Sergeant, she said. The second that assault stalls, you run. You take every man off this ridge, and you don't look back, and you don't wait for me. You understand, you don't wait for me. Her eyes held his. Don't make my mistake. Don't stand there watching someone die when you could be saving the living. When it's time, you go. And before Cole could answer, before he could argue, before he could tell her that he had made a promise that she was not going to die alone on this ridge, Ava turned and ran for the tower and began to climb up into the open, up into the guns, up toward the place where she had decided she would finally get to choose. She climbed fast, hand over hand, up the rusted ladder, the big rifle bouncing against her back, and Cole watched her go and felt something tear loose in his chest, because he knew with absolute certainty that he was watching a person climb toward her own death. Reynolds, he shouted after her, don't do this. There's another way. There's got to be another way. She didn't stop climbing, but she called back down, her voice already thin with distance and the wind. There isn't, Sergeant. Get your men ready. When it stalls, you run. The first enemy round found the tower before she even reached the top. Cole heard it strike the steel frame, a sharp ringing clang, and he flinched, but Ava didn't. She kept climbing, and the enemy commander who had spotted her the instant she started up began redirecting fire toward the tower, and Cole watched with his heart in his throat as rounds began to spark and whine off the metal all around her. She's not going to make it, Nunes said, appearing at Cole's shoulder, his face pale. Cole, she's not going to make it to the top. They're going to cut her down on the ladder. But she made it, somehow through a hail of fire that should have killed her 3 times over. Ava Reynolds reached the platform at the top of the tower, and she dropped flat, and she swung the big rifle off her back, and she settled it onto the railing, and she went to work. And what Cole saw next, he would carry with him until the day he died. Because from up on that tower, with a clean line of sight across the entire valley, Ava Reynolds stopped being a sniper and became something closer to a force of nature. The massed assault was pouring up the slope, hundreds of men committed and moving, and Ava began to take them apart with a speed and precision that did not seem human. She wasn't picking targets carefully now. She didn't have time. She was firing as fast as she could work the bolt, and every single round found a man. And the men she chose were not random. She was killing the ones in front, the leaders of the charge, the brave ones out ahead pulling the others forward. Boom, the man leading in the left prong of the assault dropped. Boom, the man who tried to take his place dropped. Boom, the man leading the center dropped, and the men behind him faltered. She's killing the point men, Cole breathed, understanding dawning. Every time somebody gets out front to lead the charge, she kills him. She's making it so nobody wants to be in front. That was exactly what she was doing. Ava had told him the secret back at the wall. A mass assault only works if the men keep moving forward together. And the men who keep them moving are the ones in front, the brave ones, the leaders. Kill enough of them fast enough, and the men in back learn a terrible lesson that to be in front is to die, and no man wants to die. And so they slow and they hesitate, and they start looking for cover instead of glory. Boom, boom, boom. Ava worked the rifle like a metronome of death, and the enemy assault began to lose its shape. The dense fist that had come pouring out of the tree line was fraying at its leading edge, because its leading edge kept dying, and the men behind were no longer running forward, but slowing, drifting, looking for somewhere to hide from the invisible hand that was reaching down out of that tower and plucking the bravest of them off the field one after another, after another. But the tower was a death sentence, and everyone knew it, Ava most of all. The enemy commander had turned nearly every weapon he had left onto that single structure. Rounds hammered the steel frame in a continuous storm. The platform shook. And Cole, watching from below, saw Ava's position getting more and more untenable by the second, saw the rounds walking closer and closer to her, and he knew she couldn't survive up there much longer. "She's buying us time," Cole said, and his voice cracked. "That's what she's doing. She's drawing every gun in that valley onto herself so we can run. Nunez, get the men up. Get them moving. We're pulling off this ridge right now while she's got their attention." But Nunez didn't move. He was staring up at the tower. "Cole, we can't just leave her up there." "She gave me an order," Cole said, and the words tasted like ash. "She told me when it stalled we run, and we don't wait for her. She told me not to make her mistake, not to stand there watching someone die when I could be saving the living." He swallowed hard. "So we run, because that's what she wants. That's the whole reason she climbed up there. And if we don't run, then she's dying for nothing, and I won't let her die for nothing." Up on the tower, Ava had found the enemy commander. Cole didn't see it happen, but he understood it afterward. Somewhere in that mass of men, Ava's eye had picked out the one who mattered most, the man standing a half step back, directing the man who had smiled after killing a wounded medic that morning, the man whose calm confidence had driven this entire assault. She had been waiting for him to show himself, and in the chaos of the mass charge he finally had. And Ava Reynolds, lying on a tower with the whole enemy force firing up at her, took a breath and let it out slow and put a .50 caliber round through the man who had started all of it. Cole knew the instant it happened because the entire enemy assault convulsed. There is a specific thing that happens to a group of men when the person directing them suddenly dies, a moment of collective confusion, of leaderless drift, and it rippled through the massed enemy force like a wave. The push, which had already been faltering, now stalled completely. Men went to ground. Men stopped advancing. Men who had been pouring up the slope a moment before were now flat on their bellies, pinned by the death raining down from the tower. No longer an assault at all, but a scattered collection of frightened individuals with no one to tell them what to do. "It stalled," Nunez breathed. "Cole, it stalled. She did it. She broke the whole assault." "Then we go." Cole was already up, already moving down the line, hauling men to their feet. Move everybody up. We're off this ridge. Grab the wounded and go, go, go. Doc and Kettler walk, carry him if you have to. We are leaving right now." Alpha Platoon rose up out of its holes and began to run back down the reverse slope of the ridge, away from the stalled enemy carrying their wounded. And every man who ran owed his life to the small, quiet woman up on the tower who was still firing, still working, still drawing every enemy gun onto herself so that they could get away. Cole ran with them. He got them moving, got them down the slope, got them onto the trail that led back toward safety. And then at the bottom of the slope, with his platoon streaming past him toward the tree line and safety, Cole Matthews stopped. He stopped and he turned and he looked back up at the tower where Ava Reynolds was still fighting, still alone, still dying for them. "Cole," Nunez shouted. "Cole, come on, we gotta go." "Get them out," Cole called back. "Get them to the extraction point. Keep them moving." "What about you?" Cole looked up at the tower one more time. He thought about the promise he had made himself, the promise he hadn't known if he could keep. He promised himself that Ava Reynolds was not going to die alone on this ridge. I made a promise, Cole said. Go Nunes. That's an order. Get our men home. And Cole Matthews turned and began to run back up the ridge, back toward the guns, back toward the tower, back towards the woman who had told him not to make her mistake, not to stand there watching someone die when he could be saving the living. But Cole had already saved the living. He'd gotten his platoon off the ridge. They were safe. And now there was only one life left on this ridge that mattered, and he was not. He was absolutely not going to run away and leave her to die alone, the way Command had left Kess to die alone, not while there was breath in his body. Up on the tower, Ava saw him coming. No! She screamed down at him, and for the first time all morning, her voice had lost its terrible calm, cracked wide open with something that sounded almost like panic. No! Matthews, what are you doing? I told you to run. Get off this ridge. Get out of here. Not without you, Cole shouted back, dodging fire, scrambling up the slope. You said we face it together. I meant it even if you didn't. Matthews, they'll kill you. Go, please. Go. And there was something in her voice now that Cole had never expected to hear, a raw, naked terror that had nothing to do with her own life. She wasn't afraid for herself. She was afraid for him. She was watching another person she cared about run toward death, and Cole understood in a flash of terrible clarity that this was her nightmare. This was the exact shape of the wound that had driven her into hiding for 3 years. Watching someone she cared about die because of a decision made too slow. And now here was Cole recreating it, running into the guns, and she couldn't stop him. And the horror of it was breaking her apart. I'm not leaving you, Cole shouted, reaching the base of the tower, grabbing the ladder. You saved every one of us. I'm not going to let you die up here by yourself. You hear me? I'm coming up. Matthews, listen to me. Ava's voice was frantic now. The tower's coming down. They've been hammering the supports for 10 minutes. The whole structure's failing. If you come up here, you'll die when it falls. I'm already dead. I've known it since I started climbing, but you don't have to be. Please do this one thing for me. Live. Cole froze on the ladder, one hand up, staring at the buckling steel supports, and he saw that she was right. The tower was failing, riddled with fire, its legs bending, and it was going to come down, and anyone on it when it did was going to die. Then come down, he screamed. Come down with me. Right now we'll run together. I'll cover you. Just come down. I can't. And there it was, the truth torn out of her. If I stop firing the assault reforms and they come after your platoon before you can get clear, somebody has to keep their heads down until your men reach the tree line. Somebody has to stay on this gun, and it's me. Matthews, it has to be me. There's nobody else. Her voice broke completely. This is what I'm for. Don't you understand? This is the only thing I've ever been good for. Let me do it. Let me finally do the one thing I couldn't do for Kess. Let me save the people I care about. Please. And Cole Matthews, clinging to a ladder at the base of a dying tower, understood that he was hearing the deepest truth of Ava Reynolds' soul. This wasn't just tactics. This was redemption. For 3 years, she had carried the unbearable weight of having watched Kess die while she waited for a permission that never came, of having a shot she couldn't take, of being helpless in the one moment that mattered most. And now up on this tower, she finally had the chance to do the things she couldn't do that day, to save the people she cared about, to not be helpless, to not have to wait for anyone's permission. And she was choosing it, embracing it, and if Cole dragged her off this tower, he wouldn't just be saving her life, he'd be taking away the one thing that might finally let her forgive herself. But he couldn't. He couldn't just leave her. There's another way, Cole said, and his mind was racing now faster than the fear. Reynolds, listen to me. You keep firing. You keep their heads down. But you don't die up there. When the platoon reaches the tree line, when they're clear, you come down, and I'll be right here at the bottom of this ladder waiting for you, and we run together. You don't have to die to save them. You just have to buy them a few minutes, and then you live. You hear me? You buy the time, and then you live. There was a silence from the top of the tower, broken only by the crack of Ava's rifle as she fired again and again, keeping the enemy pinned. You'd wait, she said finally, and her voice had gone quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet, a stunned kind. You'd stand at the bottom of a collapsing tower under fire and wait for me, so I don't have to run alone. Every second, Cole said. I'm not going anywhere. Face it together, remember. That's the deal. Up on the tower, Ava Reynolds fired and fired and fired, buying the seconds, and down at the base, Cole Matthews stood his ground under a storm of enemy fire and waited for her, and neither of them ran, because for the first time in 3 years, Ava wasn't alone. They're at the tree line, came a distant shout, and Cole recognized Nunez's voice roaring across the ridge. Cole, the platoon's clear. Everybody's in the trees. We made it. We're clear. You hear that? Cole shouted up. They're clear. Your men made it. You did it, Reynolds. You saved them all. Now come down right now. We run together. Let's go. And for one heart-stopping moment, Cole thought she was going to do it. He heard her firing stop. He heard her moving on the platform above. He heard her start toward the ladder. And then the tower's main support finally gave way. It happened with a shriek of tearing metal that Cole felt in his teeth, the whole structure lurching sideways, and Cole was thrown off the ladder, hurled to the ground, and he rolled and looked up in time to see the tower buckling, folding the top platform tilting crazily, and Ava was up there, thrown against the railing, scrambling, and the whole thing was coming down. Ava, Cole screamed, her first name. He'd never used it before. It tore out of him. Ava, jump, clear, I'll catch you. Jump. She looked down at him, even in that fraction of a second, even with the tower collapsing around her. She looked down and found his eyes, and Cole saw her face, and it was not afraid. It was impossibly at peace. Thank you, Cole, she called down, and her voice was almost gentle, almost warm in a way it had never been all morning. For waiting, for not making me run alone, for giving it back to me. Ava, jump! The tower came down. It came down in a roar of steel and dust, the whole structure collapsing in on itself, and Cole threw himself backward as it fell, and the world became noise and debris and choking dust. And when it finally settled, when the terrible groaning crash finally stopped, there was only a mangled heap of twisted metal where the tower had stood, and beneath it, somewhere beneath it, was Ava Reynolds. No. Cole was up and running before the dust even cleared, scrambling over the wreckage, tearing at it with his bare hands. No, Ava, where are you? Answer me, Ava. He dug. He didn't think about the enemy, didn't think about the fire that had mercifully slackened. Now that the assault was broken and leaderless, didn't think about anything except the twisted steel under his hands and the woman buried beneath it. He tore his hands bloody on the metal. He heaved sections of railing aside that should have been too heavy to move. He screamed her name until his voice gave out. Ava, please answer me. You don't get to do this. You hear me? You don't get to save everybody and then die. That's not how this works, Ava. And then from somewhere beneath the wreckage, faint, so faint he almost missed it, he heard a cough. Cole froze. Ava. Another cough, and then a voice weak, strained, buried but alive, unmistakably alive. Told you, she rasped. Told you I'm good at surviving getting myself killed. Cole let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and he dug harder, following the sound of her voice, hurling debris aside, and finally he found her wedged into a pocket where two beams had fallen against each other and formed a shelter over her body, battered and bloody and pinned, but alive. Her leg was trapped under a beam. There was blood on her face, but her eyes were open, and they found his, and there was something in them Cole had never seen there before, all morning, not once. There was hope. You waited, she whispered. I waited. Cole was working at the beam, pinning her leg, heaving at it. I told you I would. Now hold on. I'm going to get you out of here. Just hold on. The platoon. Safe, every one of them, in the tree line. You saved them all, Ava. Every single man on this ridge is alive because of you. He heaved at the beam, and it shifted, and she gasped in pain, and he stopped. I'm sorry. I've almost got it. Just one more. Cole. Her hand found his arm, gripped it, and even now, even pinned and bleeding under a collapsed tower, her grip was strong. Cole, stop for a second. Listen to me. We don't have time. The enemy's still out there. I gotta get you out. They're not coming, she said. Their assault's broken. Their commander's dead. They've got no leadership and no heart left. They're pulling back. I've been listening. It's over, Cole. The battle's over. You've got time, so listen to me for 1 second, please. Cole stopped. He knelt in the wreckage beside her, and he held her hand and he listened. For 3 years, Ava said, and her voice was weak but steady. I told myself the reason I hid in logistics was to escape who I was, to stop being a weapon. But that was a lie. Tears cut clean tracks through the dust and blood on her face. The real reason I hid was because I couldn't forgive myself for Kess. Because I lay there and watched him die, and I didn't save him, and I decided I didn't deserve to save anyone ever again. So I hid. I made myself useless on purpose, as punishment. Ava, let me finish. Her grip tightened. And then you got down on your knees on this ridge and screamed, "Any snipers here?" And I stood up, and for the first time in 3 years, I let myself be what I am. And I saved your men, all of them. I did the thing I couldn't do for Kess. I got to save the people I care about. She smiled through the tears. And then you did something nobody's done for me since he died. You waited for me. You ran back into the guns, and you stood at the bottom of a falling tower, and you waited so I wouldn't have to run alone. You trusted me, and you didn't abandon me, and you gave me back the one thing I lost that day, Cole. You gave me back the belief that together means something. Cole's own eyes were burning now. It does mean something. It means I'm getting you off this ridge. It means you're going home. I know, Ava whispered. For the first time in 3 years, I actually believe I might. She closed her eyes. I forgive myself, Cole. I couldn't do it for 3 years, and now lying here, I finally can. Because I finally understand. Kess didn't die because I failed him. Kess died because command made me wait. And you never made me wait. You let me choose, and I chose right. I finally chose right. And Cole Matthews, kneeling in the wreckage of a fallen tower with the blood of the woman who'd saved his platoon on his hands, understood that he had done more than save her life. He had helped her save her own soul. Come on, he said softly, working the beam free, at last gathering her up into his arms as gently as he could. Let's get you home, Ava. Let's both of us go home. The distant thump of helicopter rotors was rising now. Over the far ridge, U.S. reinforcements, finally inbound, drawn by the sound of the battle coming at last. And Cole carried Ava Reynolds out of the wreckage and down the ridge toward the sound of rescue, and behind them the enemy melted back into the tree line, broken and leaderless, and finished defeated on a nothing ridge overlooking a valley that was supposed to be quiet, defeated by a logistics clerk who was never a clerk at all, by the girl with the wrong job who had stood up when no one else could, and who had finally on that shattered tower on her own terms, and by her own choice laid down the weight she'd carried for 3 long years. The helicopters came in hard and fast, and Cole Matthews carried Ava Reynolds down off the ridge with the whole weight of her in his arms, and he did not put her down. Not for the medics who came running, not for anyone, until he had laid her himself onto the stretcher at the base of the slope. I've got you, he kept saying. I've got you, Ava. You're safe now. They're going to take care of you. My rifle, she rasped. Cole, my rifle, it's still up there, in the wreckage. I can't leave it. It's Kess's. It's the only piece of him I've got. Please. I'll get it, Cole said. I promise you. I'll go back and I'll get it and you'll have it. But right now, you let these medics work. You hear me? You did your part. Let somebody take care of you for once. The medics swarmed her, cutting away her gear running lines, calling out numbers Cole didn't understand. And one of them, a young flight medic with steady hands, looked up at Cole and said, Sir, you gotta step back and let us work. Is she your soldier? Cole opened his mouth, and then he stopped because he didn't know how to answer that. Was she his soldier? She'd been attached to his platoon for 2 days. She was a logistics transfer. He'd never spoken more than 3 words to before that morning. And she was also somehow the most important person on the entire battlefield. The person who had saved every life on that ridge, the person he had run back into the guns for. She's the reason we're all alive, Cole said finally. Every one of us, she's the reason. The medic nodded like he understood and went back to work, and Cole stepped back and let them do their job. And for the first time all morning, with the battle over and his platoon safe and Ava in good hands, the enormity of what had happened began to catch up with him. Nunez found him a few minutes later. The corporal's face was still gray, still streaked with dried blood from the gash over his eye, and he stood beside Cole in silence for a while, both of them watching the medics work on Ava. The men are all accounted for, Nunez said eventually. Everybody who made it into the trees made it to the extraction point. We lost Dawson, Vance, Rodriguez. Kettler's going to keep his arm, but he's hurt bad. Doc Ferris took 2 rounds in the leg, but he'll walk again. He was quiet for a moment. 11 wounded, 3 dead, out of 31. He turned and looked at Cole. You know what that number should have been? Cole on a ridge cut off, no comms, no support, hit by a full company of professionals. That number should have been 31, every one of us. We should all be dead up there. I know. She did that. Nunez looked back at Ava. One person, a logistics clerk nobody even knew. She turned 31 dead into 3. He shook his head slowly. Who is she, Cole? Where does someone like that even come from? And Cole thought about everything Ava had told him up at the wall in the quiet pockets between the killing. About a program called Shadowline. About an instructor named Kess who built her a rifle with his own hands. About a mission in a denied zone and a shot she couldn't take and a permission that came too late. About 3 years spent hiding in logistics as a punishment she'd sentenced herself to serve. She comes from somewhere she's been running from, Cole said quietly. And I don't think it's my story to tell. But I'll tell you this, Nunez. Whatever she was before today, whatever she thought she was, she's a hero. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure the Army knows it. The evacuation was a blur after that. Cole rode in the helicopter beside Ava's stretcher, holding her hand the whole way, and she drifted in and out of consciousness. And every time she surfaced, her eyes would find him first checking, making sure he was still there, still real. And every time he'd squeeze her hand and say, still here, I'm still here, I'm not going anywhere. And once near the end of the flight, she surfaced and looked at him and said something that Cole would think about for a long time afterward. You know what the worst part was? She murmured. All those years, it wasn't the guilt. I could have lived with the guilt. The worst part was the loneliness. I cut everybody off. I decided I didn't deserve people, so I pushed them all away, and I told myself I was doing it to protect them. But I wasn't protecting anybody. I was just alone. Her fingers tightened on his. And then this morning you screamed for a sniper, and I stood up and I stopped being alone, just like that. For the first time in 3 years. She smiled faintly. Thank you for needing me, Cole. You don't know what it means to a person who spent 3 years believing nobody ever would again. Cole couldn't answer that. There wasn't anything to say to it. So he just held her hand tighter and looked out the window at the ground rushing past below. And he made a decision right there in that helicopter that he was going to make sure this woman never had to be alone again if he had anything to say about it. They took her into surgery when they landed. Her leg was badly broken, crushed by the beam, and there was internal bleeding. And for a while it was touch and go, and Cole sat in a hard plastic chair in a hallway that smelled like antiseptic and waited still in his filthy, torn uniform, his hands still crusted with blood, and he refused to leave. An officer came to find him after a couple of hours, a major clean and pressed from the battalion staff, and he sat down beside Cole and asked him to walk through what had happened on Ember Ridge, and Cole told him. He told him all of it. The assault, the mortar that killed Rodriguez, and the radio, the sniper picking them off the moment he got down on his knees and screamed for a shooter he knew wasn't there. And then he told him about Ava, about the logistics clerk who stood up, about the rifle in the case, about every shot she took and every life she saved, and the tower she climbed and the assault she broke, and the collapse that nearly killed her. The major listened to all of it in silence, taking notes, and when Cole was done, the major was quiet for a long moment. Sergeant, he said finally, you understand that what you're describing, a logistics private taking out an entire enemy company's leadership sniper team's crew, served weapons and mortars single-handedly, turning a massacre into a victory. That's not a thing that happens. That's not a thing a logistics soldier can do. I know it isn't, Cole said. That's because she's not a logistics soldier, sir. She never was. The major's pen stopped. What do you mean? And that was the moment Cole understood that the truth about Ava Reynolds was going to come out now, whether she wanted it to or not, because there was simply no way to explain what had happened on that ridge without it. I don't know all the details, sir, Cole said carefully, but she told me some of it up there while she was saving our lives. She was part of a program, a classified one. She called it Shadowline. Elite snipers, she said, operating in denied combat zones, deep behind the lines. He paused. She left it 3 years ago. Something went wrong on a mission. Somebody she cared about died. And she transferred out into logistics to get away from it. That's why nobody knew what she could do. That's why she was carrying a custom 50 cal in a tool case. She's not a clerk, sir. She's one of the best snipers this army has ever produced, and she's been hiding in plain sight for 3 years. The major stared at him for a long moment. Then he stood up, and his face had changed, gone from skeptical to something much more careful. Shadowline, he repeated quietly. Sergeant, I need you to keep that name to yourself. Do you understand me? Don't repeat it, not to your men, not to anyone. If what you're telling me is true, then Private Reynolds' history is going to be well above your clearance and mine, and there are people who are going to want to talk to her and to you about what happened out there. Until they do, you say nothing about any program. She was a soldier who did her duty. That's all. Are we clear? Crystal, sir. The major left, walking fast, already pulling out his phone, and Cole sat back down in the hard plastic chair and understood that Ava's quiet life in logistics was over. Whatever she'd been running from it had found her again on Ember Ridge, and there was no putting it back in the case now. It was 3 days before Cole was allowed to see her. 3 days of debriefings of officers he'd never met asking him the same questions over and over, of signing documents that told him he'd never seen or heard certain things. 3 days of his own platoon being pulled apart and interviewed one by one, of the whole story being carefully documented, and then Cole suspected carefully buried. And through all of it, Cole kept asking about Ava, kept demanding to know how she was, and kept getting told she was stable, she was recovering. She was in good hands, and no, he could not see her yet. When they finally let him in, she was sitting up in a hospital bed, her leg in a heavy cast, her face still bruised, but her eyes were clear and alert, and they lit up when Cole walked in. Sergeant Matthews, she said, they finally let you through the wall of suits. Took some doing. Cole pulled a chair up beside her bed. How you feeling? Like a tower fell on me. She smiled. But I'll walk again. Eventually. They tell me I'm very lucky. She studied his face. You look terrible, Cole. Have you slept at all? Not much. He was quiet for a moment. Ava, I have to tell you something. The debrief. They asked me what happened up there, and I couldn't explain it without, I had to tell them about the program, about Shadowline. I'm sorry. I didn't know how else to explain what you did. I know it was supposed to be a secret, and I told them anyway, and I'm sorry. But Ava just nodded slowly, unsurprised. It's okay, Cole. It was always going to come out. There's no other way to explain it, like you said. And honestly, she looked down at her hands. I've spent 3 years running from who I am. Maybe it's time to stop running. She looked back up. The suits already talked to me. That's part of why it took 3 days for them to let you in. They had a lot of questions. She paused. And an offer. Cole went still. What kind of offer? They want me back, Ava said quietly. Shadowline, or whatever it's called now, they've reorganized it a few times. They said, and I'm quoting here, that a shooter of my caliber shouldn't be counting boxes. They said what I did on Ember Ridge proves I never should have left. They want to reactivate me, put me back in the denied zones, back to the work. She was watching Cole's face. They made it sound like the highest honor they could offer, like they were doing me a favor. Cole's heart had gone cold. And what did you tell them? Ava was silent for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was careful, thoughtful, the voice of a person who had done a great deal of thinking in 3 days of lying in a hospital bed. I told them I'd think about it, she said. But Cole, the truth is, I already know my answer. I've known it since the tower came down. She looked at him. I'm not going back. Not to that. Not to the denied zones and the blind missions and waiting for permission from people in chairs who've never had a rifle in their hands, watching a feed on a screen, deciding whether the person I'm protecting lives or dies. Her jaw tightened. That's what killed Kess. That whole system. A person's life came down to somebody's hesitation. Somebody who was safe and comfortable and had all the time in the world to be sure, and by the time they were sure, Kess was dead. She shook her head. I won't go back to that. I won't ever again be the person who has to wait for permission to save a life. I made that mistake once, and it cost me everything. I'm not making it again. So you told them no. I'm going to tell them no. She took a breath. But here's the thing, Cole. I don't want to go back to hiding either. 3 years in logistics, 3 years pretending to be something I'm not, 3 years alone as a punishment, that's over too. Ember Ridge showed me something. It showed me that what I can do, it matters. It saves lives. Real lives. Your men are alive because of what I am. I can't throw that away and hide from it anymore. But I can't go back to being a weapon that other people point and fire either. She looked at him, and there was a fierce light in her eyes now. So I've been trying to figure out these last 3 days what's left. If I won't be a blind trigger for command, and I won't be a coward hiding in a supply depot, then what am I? What do I do with what I am? And Cole, watching her wrestle with it, understood that he was watching Ava Reynolds try to build a whole new self out of the wreckage of the old one, the way he'd watched her dig herself out of the wreckage of that tower, and he wanted more than anything to help her. But he didn't have the answer because it wasn't his answer to give. It was hers. "What do you want to do?" he asked simply. Ava was quiet for a long time. "When I was up on that tower," she said slowly, "breaking that assault, killing those men, I kept thinking about the ones I was killing. Not with regret. They were trying to kill your platoon. They were trying to kill me. It was them or you, and I chose you, and I choose you again. But I kept thinking about how young some of them looked. Through the scope. The point men, the brave ones I was killing first, some of them were just kids, somebody's sons. And I thought about how they'd been sent up that ridge by a commander who spent their lives like they were nothing, who threw them into my crosshairs to try to get to me." Her voice was very quiet. "And I thought about all the young shooters coming up behind me in programs like Shadowline. Kids who are good with the rifle, the way I was good with a rifle, being handed the most terrible power a person can have, the power to end a life from 1,000 meters away with a squeeze of a finger. And nobody ever teaching them what that really means. What it costs, what it does to your soul to take a life, and how to keep your soul while you do it." "Kes taught you that," Cole said, remembering. "You told me. He taught you how to take a life and keep your soul." "He did." Ava's eyes were bright. "He was the only one who ever did. Everybody else taught me the mechanics. One-range ballistics, the cold technical business of the shot. Kes was the only one who taught me the weight. The only one who made me understand that every single time I put my finger on that trigger, I'm making a decision that echoes forever, that ends a whole world, that changes who I am a little bit every time." She swallowed. "And when Kes died, that knowledge almost died with him. Because there aren't many instructors who teach it. Most of them can't. Most of them never learned it themselves. They teach kids how to kill, and they never teach them how to carry it. And so those kids either break or they turn into the kind of person who can murder a wounded medic and then smile about it like that commander did on Ember Ridge." And then she said it, the thing she'd been building toward, and Cole understood that this was the answer she'd been searching for through 3 days in a hospital bed. "I want to teach," Ava said. "That's what I want to do with what I am. I don't want to pull the trigger for command anymore. I want to train the next generation of shooters. But not just how to shoot. Anybody can teach a kid how to shoot. I want to teach them what Kes taught me, the weight of it, the meaning of it. I want to make sure that every young sniper who comes up understands that every bullet changes a life and every decision changes who you become, so that they don't break, so that they keep their souls, so that they never turn into the thing that killed that medic, so that if they ever find themselves on a tower breaking an assault to save 31 strangers, they know exactly what they're doing and why, and they can live with it afterward." Her voice was steady and certain now, the voice of someone who had finally found her way. "That's what I want, Cole. I want to take the worst thing that ever happened to me, losing Kes, and I want to turn it into the thing that saves 100 other Keses, 1,000 of them. I want to make sure no instructor's knowledge ever dies with him again, including mine." Cole sat back in his chair, and he looked at this woman, this small, quiet person who 3 days ago had been counting boxes in a supply depot, who had spent 3 years hiding from herself, and who was now out of the wreckage of the worst day of her life, building something that might save more lives than any shot she'd ever fired. "That," he said quietly, "is the best idea I've ever heard." "You think so?" And there was something almost shy in it, almost vulnerable. This fearsome shooter, suddenly uncertain, needing to know if her dream made sense. "I think Kes would be proud of you," Cole said. "I think it's exactly what he'd want. I think you just figured out how to make his death mean something. And I think the Army would be out of its mind to say no to you." He leaned forward. "And I think if you'll let me, I'd like to help, however I can, because I owe you 31 lives, Ava, mine included. And a debt like that, you don't ever really pay it off, but you can spend the rest of your life trying." Ava looked at him, and her eyes filled, and for the first time since Cole had met her, she let the tears come without fighting them. You'd help me, she said. You barely know me. You met me 3 days ago. I met you on the worst morning of both our lives, Cole said. I watched you save my entire platoon. I watched you climb a tower to die for strangers. I watched you dig your way out of your own grave and forgive yourself for something that was never your fault. He shook his head. I feel like I've known you my whole life, and I feel like the world's a better place with you in it doing exactly what you just described. So yeah, I'd help you, in a heartbeat. They were quiet for a while after that, the two of them in the antiseptic hospital room, and it was a comfortable quiet, the quiet of two people who had been through hell together and come out the other side. The suits are going to push, Ava said eventually, when I turned down the reactivation. They're not going to like it. A shooter like me, they don't just let walk away, especially not twice. They're going to make it hard. Then we make it hard right back, Cole said. You've got something they can't argue with, Ava. You've got Ember Musj. You've got 31 soldiers who are alive because of you. You've got a story that the second it gets out makes you a hero the Army can't afford to bury in a denied zone. Use it. Make them see that you're worth more teaching 1,000 shooters than being one shooter in the dark. He grinned. And if they don't listen well, I've got a whole platoon of witnesses who'll swear on anything you want that Private First Class Ava Reynolds is the finest soldier they ever served with, and that the best thing the United States Army could do is let her train the next generation. That's not nothing, Ava. That's a lot of voices. Ava laughed, a real laugh, maybe the first real one Cole had heard from her, and it transformed her whole face, took years off. It showed him for just a second the young woman she might have been if the world had been kinder. Look at you, she said. 30 minutes ago, you were on your knees screaming for anybody to help you. Now you're planning my whole future. You gave me my future, Cole said simply. Seems only fair I help with yours. And outside the window, the ordinary world went on cars and people, and a sky that didn't know or care what had happened on a nothing ridge on the other side of it. And inside the room, a sergeant and a sniper sat together and began quietly to build something new out of everything that had been broken. And for the first time in 3 long years, Ava Reynolds was not alone and was not hiding and was not waiting for anyone's permission to become exactly who she was meant to be. The pushback came exactly the way Ava had predicted it would, and it came fast. 2 weeks after Cole first sat by her hospital bed, a colonel arrived, not a major from battalion this time. A full colonel flown in from somewhere Cole wasn't cleared to know about, with the kind of quiet authority that filled a room the moment he entered it, and he asked to speak with Private Reynolds alone. Ava asked Cole to stay. The colonel didn't like that. Cole could see it in the set of his jaw, in the flat way his eyes moved from Ava to Cole and back. Private Reynolds, what I have to discuss with you is sensitive. Sergeant Matthews doesn't have the clearance. Then it's not a conversation I'm having, Ava said, and her voice was pleasant and completely immovable. Sergeant Matthews knows everything that matters about who I am and what I've done, Colonel Mo. He was there. He's the only reason anyone knows what happened on that ridge at all. If you want to talk to me about my future, he stays. Otherwise, you can put it in writing. The colonel studied her for a long moment. Cole watched a silent battle of wills play out between them, and he watched with a quiet pride. He tried to keep off his face the colonel lose it. Fine, the colonel said and sat down. Have it your way. He set a folder on the tray table beside Ava's bed. Private Reynolds, I'll be direct because I'm told you appreciate directness. What you did on Ember Ridge is without exaggeration one of the finest displays of individual marksmanship and battlefield judgment in the recorded history of this program. You single-handedly defeated a reinforced enemy company. You saved 31 American soldiers. There are perhaps 3 people alive who could have done what you did on that ridge, and 2 of them are too old to deploy. He tapped the folder. You're the 3rd, and you're wasting yourself. So I'm here to bring you home. Full reactivation. Your old rank restored and then some. The program needs you, Reynolds. Your country needs you. It's time to come back to the work. It was, Cole had to admit, a powerful pitch, delivered by a powerful man. And 3 weeks ago, to a woman who'd spent 3 years believing she was nothing but a weapon in hiding, it might have worked. But Ava Reynolds wasn't that woman anymore. Colonel, she said quietly, can I ask you something first before I answer? Go ahead. Do you know how Sergeant First Class Daniel Kessler died? The name landed in the room like a dropped weight. Cole saw the colonel's face change, saw something flicker behind his eyes, and understood that the colonel knew exactly who Kess was. "I'm familiar with the incident," the colonel said carefully. "The incident." Ava's voice didn't rise, but it went cold as the wind she used to read across a valley. "That's what we're calling it, the incident." She leaned forward. "Kess died because he was pinned down in a denied zone, and I had a clean shot on the man about to kill him, and I called it in and asked for the green light, and command hesitated. 3 seconds, 4. They wanted to be sure. And while a man safe in a chair 1,000 miles away took his time being sure my instructor, the best man I ever knew, got a bullet in the back of his head. Because the system you want me to come back to decided that a moment of certainty was worth more than a man's life." She sat back. "That's how Kess died, Colonel. Waiting for permission from someone who was never in any danger and had all the time in the world to be careful with a life that wasn't theirs to be careful with." The colonel was silent. "So here's my question," Ava went on. "If I come back, if I reactivate, and I find myself out there again in the dark with a shot that has to be taken to save a life, and I call it in and command hesitates, what happens then?" Her eyes bored into him. "Do I wait? Do I do what I did for Kess and lie there with my finger on the trigger, watching someone die, obeying an order to be patient? Or do I take the shot on my own authority and save the life and get court-martialed for it? Because those are the only 2 options that system gives me, Colonel. Wait and let them die or act and be destroyed. And I've already lived through the first one. It nearly killed me. It took me 3 years to climb out of it. And I am never ever going back into a system that makes a person choose between those 2 things again. Reynolds, the colonel said, and his voice had lost some of its authority. "The rules of engagement exist for a reason. The controls exist for a reason. A single shooter acting on their own judgment in a politically sensitive zone could start a—" "I know why they exist," Ava cut in. "I'm not naive, Colonel. I understand the reasons. But I also understand what those reasons cost, because I paid the price with the only family I had, and I've decided I'm done paying it." She took a breath. "You came here to bring me back to the work. I appreciate the honor, I do. But my answer is no. I'm not reactivating. Not now, not ever. I'm done being a trigger that other people pull." The colonel's jaw tightened. "Private Reynolds, I'm not sure you understand your position. A soldier with your training and your clearances doesn't simply decline. What you can do that belongs to the United States Army. You don't get to just walk away and open a flower shop. There are obligations here that—" "Colonel," it was Cole who spoke, and both of them turned to look at him, and Cole felt his heart hammering, but he kept his voice steady because this was the moment. This was where he could pay back a piece of what he owed. "With respect, sir, I was on that ridge. I've given my statement, and so I had 28 other men. And every one of those statements says the same thing, that we are alive because Private Reynolds is exactly who she is. Now, I'm just a sergeant, and I don't understand half the classified business you 2 are talking about. But I understand people, and I understand that if the story of Ember Ridge ever got out, the story of a hero who saved 31 soldiers and then got forced back into work that broke her, that got told she didn't have the right to walk away well. That's not a story that makes the Army look very good, is it, sir?" The room went very quiet. The colonel turned slowly to look at Cole, and there was a long, dangerous silence, and Cole held his gaze and did not look away. And he thought, well, if they're going to bury me, at least I'll go down standing next to her. And then unexpectedly, the colonel laughed. It was a short, dry laugh, but it was real. "You're threatening me, Sergeant Epau," he said, "in a hospital room, with no clearance and no rank to speak of. You're actually threatening a full colonel." "No, sir," Cole said. "I'm telling you the truth about a situation. Same as I did in my debrief. That's all I've got, sir, the truth. But sometimes the truth is a pretty strong hand." The colonel looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at Ava. And then slowly something in his posture changed the hard official edge of him, softening into something more human, more tired, the look of a man who had fought a lot of battles and could tell when he was in one, he shouldn't win. "You 2, he said, "are going to be a great deal of trouble." He sat back. "All right, off the record. Just for a minute. Reynolds put the sword down and talked to me straight. If you won't reactivate, what do you want? Because you're right, I can't just let you walk away with what's in your head. but I've got more flexibility than the pitch I came in with. So tell me, what would keep you in this army instead of fighting me every step of the way out of it?" And Cole watched Ava Reynolds' face, and he saw her understand that the door had just opened, the exact door she'd been searching for through all those days in the hospital bed, and he watched her walk straight through it. "I want to teach," she said. The colonel blinked. "Teach. Train the next generation of shooters," Ava said. "Not the mechanics. There are plenty of instructors for the mechanics. I want to teach them the thing almost nobody teaches. The weight of it, what it means to take a life, how to carry it and keep your soul intact, how to be the kind of shooter who can do what has to be done and still be a human being at the end of it, instead of the kind who murders a wounded medic and smiles." Her voice grew stronger, surer with every word. "You said there are maybe 3 people alive who could have done what I did on that ridge. Fine, then let me make more. Let me take everything Kess taught me, everything I learned the hardest possible way, and let me pour it into the kids coming up behind me so that the next time this army needs someone on a tower breaking an assault to save 31 strangers, there's a shooter there who knows exactly what they're doing and can live with it afterward. That's what I want, Colonel. Don't send me back into the dark. Let me light some lamps instead." The colonel was quiet for a long, long moment, and Cole realized that something was happening behind the man's eyes, some calculation shifting, some hard official position quietly giving way to something else. "A sniper instructor," the colonel said slowly, "who teaches the ethics of the trigger alongside the ballistics." He nodded slowly, almost to himself. "You know, Reynolds, I've been in this business 30 years, and I've watched a lot of good shooters break. Watch them come apart because nobody ever taught them how to hold the weight. We lose more of them to that than we ever lose to enemy fire. We just don't put it in the reports." He looked at her, and for the first time there was something like respect in his face, unguarded and genuine. "You might be onto something that this army has needed for a very long time and been too stupid to see. So you'll let me do it," Ava said. It wasn't quite a question. "It's not entirely mine to grant," the colonel said, "but I've got weight and I know where to put it. If you're serious about this, if you'll commit to it, then yes, Reynolds. I think I can make it happen. A new instructional role, built around exactly what you just described." He paused. "On one condition." Cole tensed. Ava's eyes narrowed. "What condition?" "That you let me put your name on it," the colonel said. "Not Ember Ridge that stays buried, you know that. But your name, your reputation is inside the program. The shooters who come through your course need to know they're being taught by the best. They'll listen harder that way. They'll take the weight more seriously if it comes from someone who's earned the right to teach it." He allowed himself a small smile. "The woman who did what you did has authority I can't manufacture. Let me use it for the good thing you want to build." And Ava Reynolds, who had spent 3 years hiding her name, bearing who she was running from the truth of herself, looked at the colonel and made her final decision. "My name is Ava Reynolds," she said quietly, "and I'd be honored to teach them." The colonel stood. He extended his hand and Ava shook it, and something was settled in that handshake, something that changed the whole course of her life. "Get well, Reynolds," the colonel said. "That leg needs to heal before you can stand in front of a class. And when it does, I'll have the paperwork waiting." He nodded to Cole. "Sergeant, you've got a hell of a way of arguing above your pay grade. If you ever want a career change, come find me." And with that, he was gone, and the room was suddenly very quiet, and Cole and Ava looked at each other, and slowly, disbelievingly, they both began to smile. "You did it," Cole said. "Ava, you did it." He said, "Yes." "We did it," Ava corrected. "That flower shop line. I thought he had me. And then you came in with the truth as a pretty strong hand." She laughed, and it turned into something that was half a laugh and half something else. And she pressed her hand over her mouth, and Cole realized she was crying. Crying and laughing at the same time, 3 years of held breath, finally letting go. "I'm going to teach Cole. I'm going to take what happened to Kess, and I'm going to turn it into something that saves people. I'm actually going to get to do it." "You are," Cole said softly. "You earned it, every bit of it." The recovery was long. Ava's leg took months to heal, and there were complications and setbacks, and days when the pain was bad and the frustration was worse. And through all of it, Cole came to visit whenever the army let him, and slowly, without either of them ever quite naming it, the two of them became something to each other that neither had expected. Not romance, not exactly, or at least not yet, and not simply friendship either. Something deeper and stranger than either. The bond of two people who had stood together at the edge of death and refused to let go of each other. The bond of a man who ran back into the guns and a woman who finally let herself be saved. Cole was there the day Ava took her first steps, again gripping the parallel bars, her face gray with effort, sweat standing on her forehead, and he watched her put her weight on the healing leg and nearly fall and catch herself and try again. And he did not rush to help her because he understood by then that Ava Reynolds needed to do the hard things herself, needed to prove to herself that she could stand on her own, and so he just stayed close, ready, waiting. The way he'd waited at the bottom of a burning tower so that she wouldn't have to do it alone. "You know what's funny?" she said, gripping the bars, breathing hard. "I climbed a 50-foot tower under enemy fire without blinking, and now I can barely walk 10 feet across a physical therapy room." "You climbed that tower to save 31 people," Cole said. "You're walking these 10 feet to save 1,000. Different kind of hard." She looked at him and something warm passed between them, and she took another step and then another, and Cole watched her walk and thought that he had never in his life seen anything braver than this small, quiet woman refusing to stay down. Word of Ember Ridge, in the careful, sanitized, classified way, such things moved through an army, spread among the people who needed to know. And a strange thing began to happen. Ava Reynolds, who had spent 3 years as an invisible logistics clerk that nobody could pick out of a crowd, became in the quiet corridors of the program she'd left something close to a legend. The shooter who broke a company from a tower. The instructor who was going to teach the weight of the trigger. Young snipers coming up through selection began to hear her name, began to hope they'd draw her course, began to whisper about the woman who'd done the impossible on a nothing ridge, and then chosen to come back and teach instead of returning to glory. And nearly a year after Ember Ridge, on a cool, bright morning, Ava Reynolds stood in front of her first class. Cole was there. She'd asked him to be, and he'd pulled every string he had to make it happen, and he stood at the back of the room and watched her walking with only the slightest limp, now standing before a dozen young shooters, the best the Army had, kids with steady hands and good eyes, and the terrible gift for the long shot that she'd once had herself at their age. They looked at her with a mixture of awe and curiosity, this small, quiet woman they'd heard so much about. And Cole watched them and remembered that he'd once looked at her the exact same way across a firefight, wondering who she really was. "My name is Ava Reynolds," she said to them, and her voice was quiet and it carried to every corner of the room the way it had once carried over gunfire. "Over the next several weeks, other instructors are going to teach you how to shoot. Wind-range ballistics, the mechanics of putting a bullet at exactly where you want it from a very long way away. They're good at that, and you'll learn a lot from them. And by the end, you'll be able to do things with a rifle that most people would call impossible." She paused and her eyes moved across their young faces one by one. "I'm not here to teach you any of that. I'm here to teach you the thing that matters more than all of it put together. I'm here to teach you what it means to pull the trigger." The room was silent. The young shooters watched her rapt. "Every one of you is good," Ava said. "That's why you're here. You've got the gift. And the gift is going to give you a power that almost no one else in this world has. The power to end a human life from 1,000 meters away, from 2,000, from a distance where the person you're killing will never see you, never know. You never have a chance. You will be able to reach out across a valley and switch off a human being, like turning off a light, and you'll be able to do it in perfect safety. And you'll be able to do it again and again." Her voice dropped. "And that is the most dangerous thing about you. Not to the enemy, to yourselves. Because a power like that, if you don't understand it, if you don't respect it, if you don't carry it right, it will hollow you out. It will turn you into something that isn't human anymore. I have watched it happen. I have watched good shooters become monsters, and I have watched good shooters break into pieces. And the difference between the two, the only difference is whether somebody taught them how to carry the weight." Cole at the back of the room felt his throat tighten because he could hear Kess in every word, the dead instructor's knowledge flowing through his student and out into a new generation exactly the way Ava had dreamed it, in that hospital bed, the death of one man becoming the salvation of many. "I had an instructor once," Ava said, and her voice was steady, but Cole could hear what it cost her to say it. "The best there ever was. His name was Kess, and he taught me the only lesson that ever really mattered. He taught me that every single time you put your finger on that trigger, You are making a decision that echoes forever. You end a whole world, everything that person was, everyone who loved them, everything they might have become, gone, because of a choice you made in a fraction of a second. And that choice doesn't just change their life, it changes yours. Every trigger pull changes who you are, a little more each time. She looked at them, and there was a fierce love in her eyes now, a fierce protective love for these children she was about to send out into the hardest work in the world. Kes taught me how to take a life and keep my soul. And then Kes died, and for 3 years I thought his lesson died with him. I ran from it. I hid. I decided I never wanted to touch a rifle again. She paused, and Cole knew what was coming, and he braced for it. And then one day Ava said, on a ridge that was supposed to be quiet, a sergeant got down on his knees in the middle of a massacre and screamed for a sniper because his men were dying and he had nobody. And I stood up. Her eyes found Cole's at the back of the room and held them. I stood up because in that moment I understood that everything Kes taught me was too important to die with him or with me. That knowledge like that, you don't get to keep it to yourself. You don't get to hide it. You have a responsibility to pass it on. And that's why I'm standing in front of you today, instead of hiding in a supply depot counting boxes, which is where I spent 3 years feeling sorry for myself. A few of the young shooters smiled at that, because Kes's lesson doesn't belong to me. It belongs to you now, and someday it'll belong to the shooters you teach. And that's how a man who died in a denied zone years ago is going to keep saving lives for the next 50 years. Through you, through what I'm about to give you. She stepped forward, and the whole room leaned in with her. So here is the first thing I'm going to teach you, Ava said. Before wind, before range, before you ever touch a rifle in my presence. The first thing and the most important thing, and the thing I need every one of you to carry with you every single day for the rest of your careers and your lives. She looked at each of them in turn. Every bullet changes a life, and every decision changes who you become. You will never, not once, put your finger on a trigger without both of those things being true. So you will never do it lightly. You will never do it carelessly. And you will never ever do it without understanding exactly what it costs and choosing to pay that cost with your eyes wide open. Because the day you stop understanding the weight is the day you stop being a soldier and start being a murderer. And I will not graduate murderers, not from my course, not ever. The silence in the room was total. And then one of the young shooters, a serious-eyed kid who couldn't have been more than 20, raised his hand. Ma'am, he said, the sergeant, the one who called for a sniper, on the ridge. What happened to him? Did he make it? And Ava Reynolds smiled a real smile, warm and full, and she looked to the back of the room. Why don't you ask him yourself, she said. He's standing right there, Sergeant Cole Matthews. He ran back into enemy fire and stood at the bottom of a collapsing tower and waited for me so I wouldn't have to die alone. He's the reason I understood I couldn't keep hiding. He's the reason I'm standing here. Her eyes met Cole's across the room, and everything that had passed between them on that ridge and in the long months after was in that look. He's the best man I know. And every one of you would be lucky to serve beside someone like him. Someone who understands that no one ever should have to face the worst moment of their life alone. The young shooters turned to look at Cole, and Cole stood there at the back of the room, and he did not know what to say, so he just nodded to them, and then he looked back at Ava, and he thought about a morning on a ridge that was supposed to be quiet, and a desperate question shouted into the chaos, and a small, quiet woman who stood up when no one else could. He thought about how close they'd all come to dying on that hill. 31 men cut off, no comms, no support, overrun by professionals. How the number should have been 31 dead, and how it had been 3 because of her. He thought about the tower and the collapse, and digging her out of her own grave with his bloody hands. He thought about 3 years of a good soldier hiding from herself, punishing herself for a death that was never her fault, and how it had taken a massacre to finally set her free. And he thought about this room, this dozen young shooters, and the hundreds who would come after them, and the thousands those hundreds would teach, all of them carrying the lesson of a dead instructor named Kes, passed down through a woman who'd nearly let it die with her, kept alive, because a sergeant on his knees had screamed for help, and she had answered. Every bullet changes a life. Every decision changes who you become. Ava Reynolds had decided on a tower under fire to stop hiding. She'd decided in a hospital bed to teach instead of kill. She'd decided in front of a colonel to say her own name out loud again. And each of those decisions had changed who she became until the frightened, broken hiding woman who'd counted boxes in a supply depot was gone, and in her place stood this, an instructor, a teacher, a keeper of the hardest and most important knowledge in the world, pouring everything she was into the next generation so that no shooter would ever again be handed that terrible power without being taught how to carry it. The girl with the wrong job had found the right one at last. And as Cole Matthews stood at the back of that room and watched Ava Reynolds begin to teach, he understood that the enemy commander who had smiled after murdering a wounded medic on Ember Ridge had in the end lost far more than a single battle. He had picked a fight with a quiet logistics clerk who turned out to be the finest shooter the Army had ever produced. And in doing so, he had reached into her past and torn open a wound 3 years deep and forced her to become again the thing she'd been running from. And out of all that death and desperation and pain had come this. A new instructor, a new course, a new way. 1,000 young soldiers and 10,000 after them who would go out into the world understanding the weight of every trigger pull, keeping their souls where others would have lost them, becoming the kind of people who protect the helpless instead of murdering them and smiling. That was Ava Reynolds' true victory. Not the shots she'd fired on the ridge, not the assault she'd broken from the tower, not even the 31 lives she'd saved that day. Her true victory was every life that would be saved by every shooter she would ever teach, stretching out into a future she would never fully see, an endless echo of a single decision to stand up when someone cried out for help. She had walked into logistics to escape who she was. Ember Ridge had forced her back into that identity, into the guns and the blood and the weight. But she had not gone back to being a weapon. She had become something the Army had needed and never known how to build. She had taken the worst thing that ever happened to her and forged it into the thing that would save more lives than any bullet ever could. And that is the truth that remains the truth Ava Reynolds carries into every classroom and hands to every young shooter who stands before her. The truth that a sergeant learned on his knees and a sniper learned on a tower, and a dead instructor named Kess knew all along. Every bullet changes a life, and every decision changes who you become. Ava Reynolds decided to stand up, decided to save them, decided to live, and decided to teach. And in doing so, she did not just change one battle on one forgotten ridge. She changed the future itself. One shooter, one soul, one decision at a time forever.